Hey y'all, Auntie Amber here. Welcome back to the Clinical Cookout. I decided to hop on here and talk a little bit about autism spectrum disorder. I have had over 10 evaluations in the past month for requests for autism evaluations. However, when the kid comes into my office, I'm like, I wonder what this is about. One of the biggest things that people come in for requesting an evaluation for autism is tantrums. So their kid is having tantrums 4 to 5 times a day. And for a lot of people, the thought is, wow, my kid might be autistic or my kid might have autism. So I wanted to talk a little bit today about what autism actually is and what you can look for in terms of trying to get your kid some help. Tantrums can present in so many other mental health disorders. It can present in ADHD because they have difficulty with executive functioning and cannot regulate their emotions properly. Multiple tantrums a day could be indicative of some type of trauma. So if you have a kid, a lot of times you'll see this with foster children, but also, if you have a kid who has been physically, emotionally, or sexually abused, you will see these behaviors. So let's go ahead and dig into the difference between autism and other mental health disorders. So for one, there are two main symptoms of autism. In order to be diagnosed with autism, in order to meet the criteria for autism spectrum disorder, you have to have difficulties with social interactions and you have to have restricted interest and repetitive behaviors. If you have one and not the other, then you cannot be diagnosed with autism. You do not meet the criteria. So let's dig into these criteria and talk about what it means to have difficulties with social interactions, and then talk about what it means to have restricted interest and repetitive behaviors. So the first criteria for autism spectrum disorder is persistent deficits in social communication and social interactions across multiple contexts. Let's talk about that. Persistent deficits in social communication. This is your communication with other people. Now, if we're talking about children, this means that they have difficulties with either social emotional reciprocity. What does that mean? That means that they can't really engage in back and forth conversation. They don't really show interest in the other person's interests, emotions, in how they're presenting. So it's literally just like, okay, I need to say what I need to say, but I'm not really interested in hearing what you have to say. I'm not really picking up on your emotions and how you're feeling about the conversation because I need to get this out. There's not a lot of back and forth in someone who has autism. There's also deficits in nonverbal behaviors. So, for example, um, a lot of people use like gestures, right, to communicate how they're feeling, to, go back and forth in a conversation. For someone with autism, the verbal and the nonverbal communication, so what you're saying and your gestures might not match up appropriately. And also, there may be some, deficits in facial expressions. So you may not see their facial expressions change from happy to sad. If they're offended, you may not see that in their face. Um, and the other piece is developing, maintaining, and understanding relationships. So a lot of the times I have parents come in and say, hey, my kid, does really well with having conversations with people when it's a preferred topic, right? My kid has a friend, but this friend, they only bond over something that's a shared interest. This is very common with people with autism. So yes, you may have a friend, but if you're really interested in dinosaurs, then this is all that you and that friend talk about. Now, let's say that your kid has a friend and they talk about dinosaurs all the time and they interact well with each other when they're talking about that. If that friend switches to another topic or they switch to another activity that's not related to dinosaurs, then you may see that your child who has autism will have a really hard time interacting with that kid because this shared interest of dinosaurs is no longer there. And so that's when the difficulties with back and forth communication, understanding someone else's social cues, understanding someone else's emotions, showing interest in what this person is feeling or thinking, that may be lacking for someone who has autism. Now, The second symptom or the second criteria that I want to talk about is restricted interest and repetitive patterns of behavior or activities. So this can include, in terms of restricted interest, if you've never heard that individuals with autism are really can be really intelligent, right? So when it comes to a very specific topic such as dinosaurs, math, you know, bugs or anything that they have an interest in. One, I've seen trains, I've seen like different historic hotels that kids get interested in. They will know every single thing about it, right? They will be looking up these facts. They want to know about it. They want to buy everything related to trains, everything related to dinosaurs when you go into a store. And this is where you might get the tantrums, right? I want this dinosaur because this is a Stegomorphosaurus. Well, no, you can't have the dinosaur because you have a million of them at home. And then there goes a tantrum, right? Another thing with the restricted interest is that they may have a lot of these things, right? And they may be very particular about the items that they have related to the restricted interest. So, for example, if your kid is really interested in dinosaurs, and I'm sorry, that's a very common example that I'm using, but really interested in dinosaurs, then they may have a lot of dinosaurs at home, and these may be very special objects that no one else can touch, right? No one else can touch them. They have them organized in a very specific way. Even if their room is messy, their backpack is messy, they can't seem to pick up after themselves, their dinosaurs are always in order in a special place in their room. That would be restricted interest. In terms of repetitive patterns of behavior or interests or activities, this could be, for one, motor movement. So movements of your body, right? So this could be a lot of times you see the rocking back and forth or the swaying side to side. You'll hear, making noises with the throat, or you'll see them kind of like tapping on things, or, kind of fidgeting with their fingers. So this is where it gets a little bit confused, because these stereotypical or repetitive behaviors can also present in other mental health disorders, right? So for an individual with autism, a lot of the times it's a sensory need. I need to feel this. May not be an anxious response. I just like to feel this. I like to feel this here. This feels really good to me. I really like that noise. That sounds really good to me. I'm going to keep doing it. For individuals or children with, let's say, ADHD, they may have some of these behaviors, but it may be in response to like a challenging or stressful situation. So you might see them kind of fidgeting with their fingers, or, moving around, rocking back and forth. That's that hyperactivity, and also that difficulty regulating themselves in stressful situations. So instead of it being a sensory need, like I like how this feels, I'm going to keep doing it. For children with ADHD, you may see some of these behaviors as a coping mechanism to deal with a challenging task. So if they're having difficulty in math and their teacher puts 10 math problems in front of them, you might see some of these behaviors because they're trying to figure out, like, how can I calm my body down, because I don't like this. This doesn't feel good to me. I don't like it, right? And another thing with autism in children is that milder forms of autism may not always be detected earlier on. So, in general, if a child comes in for an autism evaluation, I'm looking to see if these social emotional difficulties and these restricted interests and patterns of behavior have been present for their entire life, right? Since they were a toddler or since they were a young child. However, for some kids, and I've seen this a lot in girls, but that is not, I don't think that's statistically correct. It may be the setting that I'm in or the area that I work in. However, I've seen this a lot in girls where they're kind of reserved, right? They stay to themselves, don't cause any problems, they don't have tantrums, they just kind of seem to go with the flow. However, internally, they're having a lot of issues with the changes in routine, right? Or the social, having to eat in the cafeteria at school. Um, so they're very functional, right? Like they can code switch, so to speak, to function in a social environment, or to function at home, or to function when things are changing. However, internally, they're not functioning very well. They're not adjusting very well. So there are different levels to autism. Level 1 is the higher functioning. So that is what probably would have been considered Asperger's prior to that diagnosis being taken out of the DSM. Level 1 means that they can function on their own. Like, they don't really need a lot of support. They may need some support in social situations like going to school, going to the grocery store, but they don't need a lot of support. Levels 2 and 3 is when you get higher into the support that's needed, right? Where maybe they have difficulties with a lot of developmental skills, motor skills, fine motor skills, buttoning up their clothes, getting dressed, completing sequential tasks, making food for themselves. There's a certain order to doing things, and they have difficulty with that and need assistance. So when I say milder forms of autism, I mean those higher functioning. They may not always be seen by others earlier on. You may find out, preteen years, teenage years, like, okay, you know what? I do see that you may be having some difficulty socially. Maybe I didn't see it earlier because you were kind of a quiet kid doing your own thing, not really, you know, causing any problems with other people, but now I'm seeing it. And that's a really big thing that I'm seeing now, is that people are like, well, my kid is 16. Why are they just now being diagnosed with autism? I'm 27. Why am I just now being diagnosed with autism? Says a lot about the providers that you saw prior to, but also that some of these higher functioning forms of autism are not always detected earlier on. So when it comes to autism spectrum disorder in children, the things that you're looking for are these deficits in social communication and these restricted interests and or repetitive patterns of behavior. So again, I have had several people come into my office like, I think my kid has autism. And the kid comes in, they're able to talk to me back and forth, they're communicating, we don't have it, they're asking me about myself. Hey, what's your name? What are some things that you like to do? Cool, can we play together? That's another thing. Initiating play is a extremely difficult thing for children with autism. So then I may ask the parents, well, we were engaging in conversation. I didn't see any social emotional difficulties here. So what is it that you're seeing? Oh, well, they're having tantrums every day. Every time a task changes, every time the routine changes, like they're having tantrums, it must be autism. Well, I can tell you that typically developing children may have difficulties with routines changing. Children with ADHD, children with a trauma background may have difficulties with routine changing. That's called cognitive inflexibility. So cognitive inflexibility means this is how you think, this is the way things should go. And if it goes any other way than this, I can't handle it. That is a symptom of a lot of mental health disorders, even anxiety in children. So that itself is not indicative of an autism diagnosis. So I just wanted to kind of provide this psychoeducation here so that you all can see what the major symptoms or criteria are of autism in terms of looking to get your child help, to get them evaluated. If your child is having 8 to 10 tantrums a day, absolutely, yes, they should be evaluated. You could be looking for some support for yourself and for your child. However, that does not always mean autism. One of the things that I like to tell parents when I come into my office is give me the symptoms. Give me the symptoms. Don't come in here saying, I know they have ADHD. I know they have autism. I've done my research online. This is what it is. Tell me what it is you're seeing. When I say give me the symptoms, I mean the behaviors. What are you seeing? Okay, my child has tantrums 8 to 10 times a day. They can't focus in class. They're moving around at home. They can't sit still through dinner. They're yelling at me whenever I tell them to do something. Those are symptoms. When you go to get your child evaluated, you give the evaluator your symptoms and allow them to evaluate and look into, assess for different types of disorders to figure out what criteria your child meets and what it is that they're dealing with. Well, I hope you guys took something positive from today. I hope that you learned a little bit about what we're looking for when we're evaluating for autism. It never hurts to go in and say, hey, I've done some research. I think my kid has some symptoms of autism, but also keeping in mind that a lot of other mental health disorders may have autism-like symptoms, and it may not necessarily be autism. So again, I hope you guys took something from today. Let me know if you have any questions, inbox us, comment here on this video.